evening. Welcome to the September 25th, 2019 meeting of the Budget Recommendations Advisory Committee. We'll be discussing the general budget and water and sewer budgets this evening, talking about the various aspects of that budget as well as some of the financial components. Begin by some introductions. I'm Bob Kelly, the chair of the committee. Proceed to my left.
Christine Suter, and I'm vice chair and subcommittee chair for Parks and Rec, Library, and Human Services.
Evening, everyone. I'm Corey Stevens, JD Halab. I'm on the Water and Sewer Subcommittee this year.
I'm Anna Grazier, and I'm on the General Budget Subcommittee. General Government Subcommittee, thank you.
I'm Liz Canada. I'm on Parks and Rec, Library, and Human Services as well.
I'm Russ Dean, Town Manager.
I'm Laura Zagopoulos, Town Accountant.
Hi, Don Clemens, Thelma Drive. I believe I'm on the DPW Subcommittee.
I'm Dan Gray. I'm on the Police and Fire Subcommittee.
Judy Rowan, Prentice Way, Chair of the Police and Fire Subcommittee. Nice to meet you.
And I'm Anthony Zwan. I live on 7 Marlborough Street, and I'm on the subcommittee covering Human Services, Library, and Parks and Rec.
And I'm Nancy Belanger, 1 Mill Street, Exeter, and I'm the chair for General Government Subcommittee.
Excellent, thank you. We also have members of the select board here. Do we want to start with Julie and proceed?
Ian Sermon,
Eagle Coast D Select Board member.
Kathy Corson, select woman person.
Excellent. Thank you for the 4 of you attending. So we've sent some emails out and had some conversations over the last few weeks about subcommittees. It sounds like everybody's on board with what they were assigned. If there's any confusion, Tai Shin is also assisting Nancy and Anna on general government, and Nick Gray will be with David Bevins and Don on DPW general. And also Nick is going to be assisting you with police and fire. Judy, that would be Judy. Again, if that is not correct, see me after the meeting and we'll figure things out. So the general schedule, as we discussed last time, the sort of budget process begins in earnest the middle of October on Friday the 18th. It's an all-day meeting. Begins at 8:30. The town will be springing for lunch, so we'll get right at it for about 8 hours. Nancy will be chairing the discussions that day on general government, and then we'll proceed ahead roughly every week or so after that with the various committees, again, the schedule that we talked about in July. And the procedure is that everyone on a subcommittee should be getting together and making their own schedule with their department chair, representatives, and a couple of things probably that are intuitive, but that you should make sure you take care of is, one, the meeting needs to be posted through Pam McElroy, Russ's assistant, and just email her, just tell her where and when, and she'll post it on the town's website. And you should also take, I'm sorry.
Name again, please.
Pam McElroy. Hey, Nick.
Yeah, that's MCELROY.
And also, you should take minutes at those subcommittee meetings. They don't need to be really extensive, but just to document certainly who's there, the general form of the discussions, again, time and place, that sort of thing, just so there's a public record of what was discussed, and then those will be entered into the record. Let's see, anybody else have any administrative things that they have either questions on or Yes.
So this year we have a new line, or a new budget, sustainability advisory. It's falling, I think, under Dave Sharples.
Right.
As planner?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because it's brand new.
What is
so
it?
the Sustainability Advisory Committee. It has a budget.
Oh,
Russ will be discussing that.
Yeah,
when we
so
talk
I'll
about the narrative.
update my agenda to include that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so without further ado, we'll have Russ sort of go over the narrative for the budget and the various departments. He met with the select board on Monday, effectively conducted the same thing, sort of highlighted where some of the pinch points are. The budget is up a little bit more than we've been used to over the past few years. A few projects that need to be done, as well as some general expenses that, like health insurance, that is quite a bit more than it has been in the past. But Russ will detail those, and we can get into a minor discussion afterwards, but we'll talk about it more in depth at the subcommittee and then the full meeting level. So Russ, why don't you take it away?
Sure. So thank you, everyone. I feel better this year because I'm not rushing from the airport to the meeting. So had a little bit more time to reflect on tonight, which has been good. And, you know, one of the first themes I guess I'd point out is first things I wanted to do was welcome our new members to the committee. And this is actually my 14th budget, I believe, I've been working my way through. And what a difference a year makes, because last year when we were sitting here, we were talking about probably the standard, 1% valuation increase that we're used to seeing.
Right.
And we just had our revaluation, which was about a 24% increase in the net taxable number for the town, which is a big, big jump, about $420 million in value. Probably about 5% of that is new development, and about 95% is existing properties that have really seen their value take off because of market conditions. So, and changes in sales and everything in between. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the town share of the tax rate will likely decrease. I'm pretty confident I can say that, probably by at least $1, if not more, when we set our tax rate. We are waiting, like we do this time of year, for DRA to come through with the utility values, and they haven't done that yet, and I'm hoping to kind of hold off until we get them, because we think that those should increase, and we don't really want to use last year's figures. So we're sort of holding out on that right now. So from a value perspective, the average single-family home value in town has gone from about $337,000 up to just north of $400,000, so around $400,700. And I just got that number from Janet Whitten, our deputy assessor, today. So she did a great job pulling those numbers together for us. So that is the value side of the house. The other thing I wanted to mention there too is that the TIF out on Epping Road, the value at this time last year was about 21 million. This year it's about 43.
Wow.
So the TIF has been extremely successful, and a lot of that credit goes to Darren and his work that he's been doing. He's really been focused out there, and certainly with the support of the planning board and others that have really helped, and the select board marshal all of the pieces of that through the different corridors that it has to work its way through for projects and things like that. So we're excited about that. The 43 million doesn't actually include the Unitil project, which is broken ground recently, so that will add to it, and also the Monahan project, which I know is being proposed, I think, at the next planning board meeting. There have been quite a few of them lately, so it may be 2 meetings away. But things are good there, and so in terms of the town, on the value side, certainly seeing 24% increases. I have not seen that certainly in my tenure as town manager. I'm much more used to the 1% and 2%. So this will be our last contract year with MRI too. So part of the 2020 budget, we'll be working with them to see how we want to move forward on the assessing front. So that is the value side. In your binders, what you have, and I do want to thank Laura and Pam McElroy, who spent a lot of time today putting these binders together for you. What you have in there is the Town of Exeter preliminary budget. And again, as Bob pointed out, this is the beginning of our process, so the numbers that you're seeing here are going to be the starting point. And this budget process actually takes us all the way through January to the second Tuesday in January typically where we have a public hearing on the budget, so there's a lot of twists and turns that are going to happen between now and then. Those who are on the committee know that, but you have a 31-page narrative, which I'll be going through some of the highlights of that. I don't plan on going through it verbatim, but I will hit a lot of the points that are in here because they do speak to some of the increases in the budget, and maybe you have some preliminary questions you'd like to ask about that. The tab number 2 is what we call the comparison budget, which is really the line items brought up to the program level, if you will. And one of the things that I wanted to point out for this year in the comparison budget, and when we get to the line items it will actually show too, is that in the public safety area, what we did is we broke out, and it's on the second page of the comparison budget, we broke out public safety a little bit differently than we have in the past. So what you're seeing is police and fire sort of next to each other, and communications has been carved out as a shared public safety service because actually they handle both police and fire, so they're shown on a separate line. And then we have health. We took health kind of out of the fire piece to show separately again as sort of a shared service. And the other thing we did is we took the police and fire budgets and we basically consolidated the line items in those budgets. So when you get into the line item detail, what you're going to see is essentially one, for example, one full-time wage budget instead of admin, staff, and patrol. You're just going to see one line that says full-time wages. And I think it should simplify the look at the budget. Tab 3 is actually the line item budget, and because it's just so easy this year with the binders, you can flip over to page, I think it's 16 of 15 actually, of the line item account budget to see what I'm talking about. So when everybody gets there, just kind of nod your head and I'll. So you can see that the police budget, for example, that's what I was saying, all the accounts are basically consolidated. So instead of multiple programs, you have all the line items, but there's just one set. So when you're looking through it, like I said, it should make comparing easier, it should make the total numbers easier, be able to distinguish benefits, expenses, and wages, and so forth. And on the next page is the fire request. Same thing there. You can see that we just basically took the pieces and broke them down, simplified it is what I would like to describe it as. So I think that'll help, should help the police fire subcommittee quite a bit. So we did jump ahead a little. That is tab 2 is the comparison budget. Tab 3 is the line item budget, which is the lowest level of detail, the most detail that we have. Tab 4 is the 5-year actual trend for our line items. So you can go through these sheets and see basically what the spending trend has been over the past 5 years. So that'll also give you some education about what the spending has been like. Should help map the budget for you. And then tab 5 is because we do 3 different budgets, the general fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund. Tab 5 is the water fund. And tab 6 is the water fund actual expenses for the last 5 years. Tab 7 would be the sewer fund. Tab 8 are the sewer fund actuals for the last 5 years. And then tab 9 is the detail behind the town buildings budget, which shows all of our utilities and our facilities, utilities, water, sewer bills, things like that for our town buildings, along with a couple of other smaller budgets, the Swayze Parkway maintenance budget, the bandstand maintenance budget, Simpson State, and so forth. And then the very last page in the binder are a summary of new positions that have been requested as part of this budget, and they will show you on a dollars basis of the increase that we'll be talking about in a moment, what the dollar figures are associated with that. So there are 4 different positions, or 4 total positions that have been requested by the departments. 3 are full-time, 1 is part-time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment.
And just to be clear, with the personnel, it says included in the budget, so the numbers are in there. It's just they're pulled out and showed separately here as well.
So, right, and that's a great segue, so yes, yeah, that's correct. Yeah. And on the heels of the conversation the committee had last year, because there was quite a bit of discussion around that, what we did is we just built the position request into the base request.
Nice job in the presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Super helpful.
I've got a
this
good
is,
crew that
this
helps
is
me
really
as well,
nice.
so they've done a great job. So, I talked a little bit about the process. The 5-year tax rate trend, I did touch on the tax rate, as I mentioned earlier, and on pages 2 and 3 of the narrative, you can see sort of a comparator of what our tax rate has been the last 5 or so years on the town side. The statistic there is that the town is basically 25% more or less of the individual tax bill. So of your tax bill you get every year, about a quarter of it goes toward town services for every dollar that you pay. The net taxable value, I mentioned that's what we base our tax rate on, and you can see the big increase in 2019 and the number associated with that. So, and then like last year, I put together a list of comparator communities just so you could see of towns around us and some that we would consider similar to us, what their municipal rates are, and what their 2018 tax rate was in total. And as I always like to point out, you know, one of the things about Exeter, we're catching up a little bit, but towns like Hampton and Bedford, Portsmouth, Londonderry, they still have quite a bit more of a tax base to draw from than Exeter. So even though we have, there are similarities in population to some extent, the valuations can be quite different. And also, like, when we talk about a town like Durham, the university pays for, I think it's 50% of their fire department budget, and they don't have in-house EMS service. So even though you see the tax rate that you see there, there's a good chunk of their services that are paid for by the university, which I would love to have, but we do have PEA, who is in our top 3 of the taxpayers in town, so we certainly benefit from that. So going over to the budget request, this is on page 5, looking at it. The initial request, and so let's talk about how we get to the number first of all. So in 2019, in March, there was a number, the operating budget article that was voted was $19,066,857. And the request coming in right now is $19,969,842. So that request is 4.74% over that 19,066,857. Now, one of the main reasons I mention that is because as you go down the page, you see there's a different number of FY19 approved budget, 19,117,296. So what we do to get to that number, which is a 4.46% difference, is we add in, and it's on the next page, page 6. So to crosswalk through it, we take the approved budget, Article 10 from FY19, we add the fire collective bargaining, the SEIU collective bargaining, and helps us get to a new number. We also have, sorry, I think I missed something in there. Or did I get it all? No, I got it all, sorry. So those 2 collective bargaining agreements were approved, and so we build those costs into the base budget for the following year. So you can see the starting point. So whether you want to call it 4.46 or 4.74%, it's a reflection of the voters approving those labor contracts last year, and we built them into the budget. So, so just looking at the numbers, and then we break it down by table, so you can see the general government, finance, tax, treasurer, assessing, planning, building, economic development, police, fire, EMS, emergency management, communications, health, public works, general fund, maintenance, garage, welfare, human services, parks and rec, other culture, recreation, public library, debt service capital, benefits and taxes, gets you all the way down to the bottom line and the comparison number between the FY20 request and the FY19 approved amount there. So just by looking at the table, you can see right away where some of the more substantive increases are. So in the numbers, one of the things that I will point out is that they have not been adjusted for health insurance, the department level budgets. So what you're seeing is we have budgeted for a 10% reserve in the benefits and taxes budget. And that is based upon a meeting we had just this past Monday with Health Trust. I wouldn't actually expect that number to deviate a lot. Last year, we did 5%, and it came in at 6.9, so we had to adjust the budgets upward off of that number. This year, we're doing 10%. I am told it's right in there. You know, we have had some claims, things come through this year that have impacted it, but, you know, it is at that increase rate. That's what we're seeing. The other big piece of the benefits and taxes is last year we had at the 11th hour, we had Primex come in and give us $115,000 discount, a dividend from their pool on workers' comp. And so we've actually, we took that out of the FY19 number, and we've had to add it back into FY20 because even though we're expecting a dividend this year, we have already been confirmed for one, but it's a lot smaller, and it came in July, and I don't have any information right now as to whether, you know, can we expect something similar, you know, in December. That was the first time that has ever happened last year, so I don't know. We'll be checking with them to see if there's a possibility that it would happen again this year. But for right now, we built the number back in. Just in terms of wages, all of our collective bargaining agreements are extended through 2021. We have two that are as far out as 2022. So in terms of labor negotiations, we're in good shape there. And for non-union wages, we've budgeted for FY20 in a similar fashion to the recently negotiated union contracts. So we do have a step increase and a COLA adjustment in July of 2020, and also a change in the health insurance contribution for our Blue Choice plan for non-union contributions. So it would be 18% in July of 2020 for Blue Choice and remain at 13% for Access Blue New England's HMO, which is consistent with what we've been doing with the unions. Dental is budgeted at a 2% increase. I'm now over on page 8. And you can see that we have Delta Dental for our insurance, which is also offered through the Health Trust. And then retirement, you can see these are the rates applied to payroll. So for Group 1 employees, those are all administrative and DPW employees, that's 11.17%. Group 1 employees participate in Social Security, so there's an additional 6.2% for that on top of the 11.17. And then police and fire do not participate in Social Security, but they're considered Group 2 employees. And those are so for every dollar of payroll, it's 28 cents and change for the police, and fire, it's 30.9% contribution there. So that is that. So just to work through some of the increases, as I say, I think some of the themes in the budget, as you look through, you'll see some varying percentages. Select board, town manager, human resources. I will point out in HR, we have our first, we have a full year roll-up of the part-time person that was hired. She's doing a great job for us, by the way. Her name is Brittany Flower, and she's our HR assistant right out here. She's been great helping us convert our Munis payroll system and doing some other things, so we're glad to have her. She came to us from Liberty Mutual, actually, and she's been super. So there's a full year of that budgeted here. And then also we've had a few classification requests in our budget process this year. So we have a classification plan that has positions listed by grade. So there are funds in here to look at that. I think those of you remember last year we had the similar conversation and there were dollars requested for that. And I think it's probably good practice to keep something aside every year because with each year jobs do change. I mean, and we should be addressing that in our classification plan.
So is our HR director recognizing some relief from having the help as we had hoped?
Oh, I think so, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still pretty fresh as far as I think time flies, so I'm not exactly sure how long Brittany's been here, but yes, it's definitely helped. So transportation and legal are similar from last year. IT, if you look at IT, that's a pretty significant increase in the request. And again, one of the budget themes this year is we've been talking a lot about our IT budget and how our IT resources have been stretched thin. And I know the general government subcommittee, when you talk to IT, you'll get the detail from that. But throughout this budget, our IT is a two-person operation, and both of them spend a lot of time on EXTV, other outside issues. And one of the things that we're really seeing is an uptick in demand throughout the organization for IT assistance. And also, it's just getting harder to make sure that our systems are running properly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we have some real challenges with that in the cybersecurity areas, 91A requests that are now filtering emails, text messages. There are just a lot of demands in that area. So I think that that's one of the conversations we need to have this year, is what the roadmap is for IT. I know in their budget, they've actually asked for funds to do an IT audit, which I think is a good idea, to have somebody come in from the outside. Andy's gotten 2 quotes for that. They're both in the neighborhood of $8,500, and that's part of the IT budget request. The other piece of that, the other major piece, is the public safety complex, upgrading their cameras and some of the systems they have over there for their building security, which has been raised as an issue to Andy. So that money is in there, and I encourage the police and fire subcommittee to also talk with the chiefs about that particular issue. So IT is a big theme in the budget for this year. Trustees of trust funds is the same as last year, so there's no increase there. That is a part-time 3-member board elected and paid a stipend that's been the same for a very long time. The town clerk budget is a decrease. Again, these numbers don't reflect any health insurance changes, so they're sort of the baseline number. That has mainly to do with the changeover in personnel. We had some retirements there. The town moderator and elections registration are both increased by the dollars that you see there, and that has to do with more elections coming up. 2020 is going to be a very busy election year, so we have set aside more funds for that. So those are the general government departments. No questions, I'll move on. So finance, tax, collection, treasurer, and assessing. The finance budget is up 6.6%. The changes there are additional training funds from Munis, additional contract services funds to handle fulfilling an OPEB requirements, which is something we need to do for our audit. An increase in audit fees of $3,000, which we haven't had an increase in those fees in a long time. And then wages and benefit changes related to health insurance. We did have some personnel changes, so we've had a plan change there. So that's driving some of that increase as well. In the treasurer area, that's more or less unchanged. There is a decrease after a few years of trying to fill that deputy treasurer position. We basically come to the conclusion that we probably can't do it. And this is one of those positions that they would get a stipend of $1,000 if we got a deputy treasurer. So we've taken that out of this year's budget and reduced it accordingly. So we've taken that number out. Then tax collection is up slightly. We also had a retirement in the tax collection area this year. So Linda Fecto retired, and we have Rachel Lochner, who's our new deputy tax collector, and she's been doing a great job for us so far. And so the tax office hasn't really seen many changes budget-wise. Going down to assessing, the number is an increase, and that's mainly related, the FY20 budget is related to the changes. Vision Appraisal is doing an upgrade of their software, and it's a pretty significant upgrade, and it's also money to move the system onto the cloud, which again, in the IT area, you're going to be hearing more about the town and Andy and IT wanting to do more with cloud-based services instead of having our own servers. So that's going to be a theme as we go through. But there is a cost to that, and that's what part of this increase is. So that's the finance area. And then in planning, building, economic development, I would say the big change in the planning budget is the studies budget has been increased because we have not updated our impact fee ordinance in a long time. And so there are studies, budget increases in there. What you find is impact fees are actually a very specialized field. There's probably one individual in the entire New England region that we know of, a guy named Bruce Mayberry, that does this kind of work. Like, there's nobody else. He's still doing it, and he's the guy. So
I think he did our water and sewer
he-
impact fees like 20 years ago.
he's been around for a really long
happens to him.
time, and he's still around, still doing this work. So we have not updated our ordinance in a long time, and we really do need to have it updated. And so the studies money budget reflects that. And then, as is pointed out here, there's a decrease in the capital outlay line. Dave went in and took out close to 9,000 out of that capital outlay line item for FY20, so that balances it out pretty well. And then in economic development, there's a 3.8% increase. A lot of that is due to the additional training funds. Darren has been part of a certification program through the Economic Development Institute at the University of Oklahoma, and he'd like to finish that program, and so some budget money has been allocated for that in economic development. Then we're over to code enforcement inspections. That is a 1.8% increase. Again, not many changes there, just more wage benefit adjustments to that budget. Then we're down to sustainability, which if you've been following the select board meetings, there's been a lot going on that front with there's a citizens committee committed to securing funding for sustainability, to work on sustainability initiatives. So they have been discussing a position, and the board has had a chance to weigh in on that initially, and now this is over to the Budget Recommendations Committee to consider. So these, this budget reflects having a position that would be part-time, 24 hours a week, and it would be graded similar to our natural resource planner position in our classification plan. So that's the ask, and that's a new budget, and so it, we found the best spot we could for it on the list, as far as where to slot it in.
This would be 8 months worth of salary?
8 months, right. And I think the breakdown of that is in, when you go into your binder, tab 9, if you go to the back, it shows the actual wages, and I think there's some FICA and Medicare involved there. And then the remainder of it above the 24,241 is $3,000 in expenses. So that's that. Going to some of our smaller board budgets, the ZBA, the HDC, the Concom, the Heritage Commission. You can see, just looking at the numbers, that there aren't a lot of real big changes there, or really any changes. Those are pretty much the same. HDC has been carrying grant matching funds. Sometimes that flip-flops back and forth between HDC and Heritage. And for consistency's sake, we kind of left it in HDC. So you could see the year over year a little bit easier. So now we can move on to the big budgets. Police Department, the FY20 request is a 1.7% increase. So the police department's actually had quite a few staffing changes in the past year. We now have a structure difference where we have a chief, and we no longer have the 2 captains, but we have a deputy chief and a lieutenant. And the wage change there was about a neutral in terms of wages. And there is money set aside in those budgets also for, we talked about IT. Public safety is going to come through the process and be looking for additional contract help to support public safety specifically. And as you know, we are doing our public safety facility and staffing analysis too. So we have a company called CPSM, the Center for Public Safety Management. They're actually on site here this week, and they're doing a really nice deep dive into our data collection and reporting systems over in public safety. So I think, you know, we're anxious to hear what they have to say about what our capabilities are, because I think one of the things that, even though this is their first visit to New Hampshire and doing a study here, they've done 300 of these, plus or minus, across the country, so they know, as the police chief said to me, they know exactly what to look for. And I know he's getting a lot out of it already, and they have a lot of things to say and talk about with our departments. So we'll wait to see what that looks like when they're through their work.
When will we have that result?
So the response, we're expecting it sometime around December-ish. It's about a 130-day window. So, which is what the response time was from getting them off the ground to completion. So, be late November, early December, hopefully, to get that result. So a couple of the other line item details in police are there for you to read through. There's some fuel reductions, office equipment maintenance increase. And the department has also included a $10,000 placeholder. That's for parking enforcement scanners. We've been having quite a few conversations at the select board level about parking on Lincoln Street and kicking off a paid parking program at the train station and possibly along Lincoln Street. So there has been a placeholder put in that budget just for that purpose. And then fire emergency management is 4.6% increase. You can see here that the department's requested the 2 full-time firefighters. I think they have been doing that for a couple of years. And, you know, understanding that the study is going on and there are things happening there. But these requests have been made by the department. They're part of the budget. The increases there are in wages and in the retirement and expenses are increased a total of 3.9% in addition to that. The major increases are in the education training line, protective equipment, and then the contract services, as we talked about before, between police and fire, that's splitting that $33,000 half and half between the police and the fire. And then the capital outlay has been increased by $11,988, and this is to improve the emergency operations center technology capabilities. And my note on this is that the item may be looked at for funding from EXTV Cable TV Fund along with potential grants. That's actually about a $30,000 ask. And so they've talked about a grant potentially being available for that, and depending upon the technology that we're employing, I would think that we might look at EXTV or as a partner in funding that request.
This is for, I'm sorry, Emergency Operations Center. So it has nothing to do with broadcast TV in the sense of what we put out there for the 2 stations that we support.
My answer to that at the moment is I don't think we know that answer in totality. I think it's something that we need to explore and find out whether it's exclusive to them or it's going to be accessible by EXTV to do things with.
But it's not programming, for TV programming.
There's a list of equipment they would like to purchase.
Right, but this is not for programming going out on 98 or 22.
The best answer I can, it's a question. The best answer I can give you right now is I don't know.
Okay.
We'll find
Well,
out.
as we delve down
Right.
into the subcommittees, we'll find out. Cool.
So going down to communications, so that budget is actually down quite considerably under FY19, and a lot of that is due to changes in wages and benefits. So reduction in health insurance plans, people retiring, change outs in wages. That is really driving that. So a family plan can be pretty expensive in terms of health insurance. So just 1 or 2 changes in that area can really knock the number down. Then in health, that's up 1.3% over FY19, and that budget includes our full-time health officer, James Murray, and then the wage increase you can see here, and then mobile communications increase. That's a smartphone or iPad for that. So there are decreases in dues and travel associated with that to get you to the final number. so that's public safety. Public Works General Fund. Admin and engineering is a 2% increase, and I won't do a deep dive into the narrative here, but you can read that. That's all of our admin positions and our engineering positions in Public Works. Some of these are split 60-40 with the water sewer fund, that hasn't changed. In highways and streets, that's where you'll see one additional personnel request, full-time heavy motor equipment operator. The budget changes include wages for a full-time operator for 8 months. And then an additional 5,000 has been requested for the tree maintenance account due to the Emerald Ash Borer presence in town. And the street marking account has been reduced by $10,000 to $30,000 in the coming year. And the culvert replacement account has been increased by $23,000 to do a culvert replacement project over on Tamarind Lane, which is a public road. Snow and ice has increased for the first time in a few years. This is up 6.3%, so we're putting more money into our contracted maintenance. And again, we want to remain competitive with trying to be able to attract contracted plows, which is hard to do in this environment. And again, obviously you'll see the actuals on snow and ice. Some years we have to pull from our snow and ice deficit fund when we go over. And we're just trying to, this budget is being increased modestly, I think, just to keep up with inflation and add a little bit of dollar value to that. Solid waste is up 100, that's one of the larger increases, 121,000. And the bulk of that is the solid waste contract, 39,880, and then the landfill monitoring account. So there are things happening over on our landfill that we are needing to do more work with. The 2 additional monitoring wells and for dioxane monitoring and costs resulting from anticipated Pickpocket Dam modifications. So the Pickpocket Dam is actually tied into different things that we do at the landfill as well because of its location. So as we move everything ahead with those initiatives, Public Works will be able to describe some of those challenges that we've had. But we have a current contract with GZA Environmental, and so there are funds in there to do more at that site. Then we have a $10,000 increase in the household hazardous waste collection, and this is partially offset by revenues, but this is a reflection of the cost, so it's a gross budgeting thing. Streetlights are 0% request. I think everybody knows we changed our streetlights to LED, and the reason it's a 0% increase is because we have begun the process, or will be in FY20, the first year of amortizing that payback on the buying the lights. So it'll be level for 5 years, and then we'll begin to see the savings after that 5th year. So, but 0% increase for FY20.
Quick question on that.
Yeah.
Is there, what kind of feedback have you received from the general public on the new streetlights, if any? Curious.
Very little, but what I have has been all good. Yeah, people are actually really happy with the lights.
Yeah, I like them.
Yeah, when I say very little, it's, people aren't, coming through the door saying, but generally out in the community and talking with people, I think they're very pleased.
You can definitely see your shadow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they do exactly what we advertised it would do, and they're great. That's one opinion. I didn't know how the rest of the public was, but they were voicing any opinion on that. But that's, if they're not saying anything, it's like, good referees aren't noticed in a game, right?
If I may, does this reflect the usage of electricity, and will that, and is the cost of the electricity reduced with these LED lights?
It is.
And is that factored into this
Yes.
particular line item?
Yeah, so we will pay less in electricity as a result. And like I said, that gap is the 30,000 or so per year that we are paying back, the net book value of the lights themselves.
Okay.
So.
Good project.
Before we leave Public Works, Russ, just a quick question on the landfill monitoring. Were those requirements given to us by DES, or is it part of a longer-term thing that GZA's put together, or how, it seems like it's a lot of money that's
Yeah.
popped out of nowhere here.
Right.
I know we've talked about the landfill and other things for years, but never to this extent.
Yeah. I think it would be good to hear from Public Works on that. I don't think it's necessarily a mandate, although we're beginning to get more, there are more concerns coming out of the landfill area in terms of the groundwater management zone and making sure that we're staying ahead of testing areas that we should be testing based upon the leaching and things that are
Okay.
happening there. So, no one's ordered us to do anything, but I think there are some general things that have been raised.
All right, thank you.
To that line, again, questions for Public Works, but will the new PFAS standards, they'll probably apply to the wells, I mean, to the landfill. Do we anticipate any additional, what the results will be of that testing? Will it cost more to test? And
Probably.
corrections, do we know that yet, or are we anticipating, or?
I don't have a number, but we do anticipate, we have a number for water.
Yeah, there's
sewer.
A
because
lot of
there are
aspects
more-
of the
Yeah,
town that are
lab
going to be
testing
testing
and
for
lab equipment
PFOS.
accounts are definitely up in that area. So I think PFAS, PFOA are part of all of our testing now that we're doing.
Right, yeah, I know we just did some tests
Right.
this summer, but the ones at the landfill didn't meet the new standards, from what I understood.
Yeah.
The wells did though, which is good. Okay. More unfunded mandates, Bob.
That's why I keep doing this, Tom.
The maintenance budget. So the maintenance general budget is an increase of 18,279, 3.6%. The changes there, there's a request for additional contract cleaning, and that's specific for the recreation building, so that's an $11,000 increase, and that's really the lion's share of the increase in maintenance general. In town buildings, it's up 10.6%, but a lot of that is a movement of the train station liability insurance number from the insurance account back over to the train station budget. So it's about 22,000. It's down there, you can see it. And then we did have to adjust some of the town building accounts for water sewer bills because of the new rates that are coming into play, so we've increased that. And then the rec building maintenance account was increased by 2,000, but there's a 2,000 decrease in the Exeter Historical Society 47 Front Street building to offset that. And then in the maintenance projects budget, that's been level funded at $100,000. I noted in here that the facilities committee has been working toward conducting a facilities condition assessment in FY20, and this is something they've been working through, and this would produce a capital improvement planning tools to replace, for replacement of key elements within facilities such as roofs, HVAC, electrical, et cetera. We currently don't have I would call it an industry standard program to help us do that. And so this exercise would get us there. And I think we know as a town, we have a lot of facility issues, so this is looking at existing facilities, it's not looking at what we're building that might be new. The garage budget is a decrease of 5,388, and a lot of that is due to, there are changes in wages and benefits there, and there's a reduction in the mechanics tools line item of $14,000. If you remember last year, we went through and the lift has been purchased for the garage, so that line item's been reduced down. So those are the DPW departments. Welfare Human Services, that's up 7.2%, and that is primarily due to an increase in the direct relief. So we are definitely seeing an uptick in activity in that area, and so we have gross budgeted it, and the increase is what it is. That's something we have to provide if somebody qualifies for it, and Sherry did before, and now Pam's doing a really good job of triaging with outside human service agencies as much as we can to help offset some of those costs to help us. So that's Welfare Human Services. This budget also includes all the agencies, so the Human Services Funding Committee is going through their process as we speak on that as well. And then Parks and Rec, going down to Parks and Rec, that's a 4.3% increase, and there are a couple of changes there. One is the full-year funding for the office manager, that was approved in the FY19 budget. And then FY20 budget changes are senior services. They put forward an initiative to put some programming together for seniors, and the funding request for that is $7,500. And then in the parks budget, it's a decrease, but there are increases as well. But overall, it's a decrease of 1.1%. And they've made some adjustments in that budget. They've eliminated the seasonal parks help because they found it too difficult to hire, and Greg will talk to the subcommittee about that. They did make a good effort at trying to do it, and it didn't work out. So we've been using contracted services, and then there are some additional things that they're looking to do in terms of landscaping, mowing, and general parks maintenance that are part of this budget. And so those lines are actually increased. There's a reduction of capital for the mower that was budgeted and purchased in FY19. So that's why you're seeing the total number not change a whole lot. Then in other culture and recreation, there's no change in that budget. You can read through, this is the sort of the one stop for our special events, Christmas lights, the holiday parade, summer concerts, brass band, veterans activities, and the festival, American Independence Museum Festival fireworks, which are actually paid for by Parks and Rec as part of that event. And then the library budget, that was submitted, again, this is the library budget's a 0.1% increase at this point, 0.1% over FY19. And so it's essentially level funded, and again, we'll adjust that budget once we get our health insurance numbers, so that will change a little bit, but it is a pretty flat budget. Debt service and capital, moving down to that, debt service is down $17,634, 1.7%, so that's just from maturing debt. And as part of your tools for the budget, everybody should have a capital improvement program. And I would point people to, if they're very interested in looking at our maturing debt and our projects, it's also in the budget, but we have schedules in the back here. I will say that in FY20, we are expecting that we will not have a payment on the new library in FY20. That'll be FY21, but there will be some bond anticipation note interest that's due in FY20 on that project. And then so that's really, those are the changes in the debt service accounts. In the vehicles and equipment, it's a decrease of $104,761. That is mainly due to lease purchases being retired off of the schedule. So we have some that are coming off, and our lease amounts are decreasing. We'll talk about vehicles when we get to warrant articles, but there are 2 cruisers in the operating budget right now under this account, just like there were in FY19. I think the committee people that were here last year know that we had a lot of conversation about vehicles and ultimately settled on a capital reserve fund that actually didn't end up happening. So there's a list here under warrant articles that represents all of the, I'll call them the other requests other than potential lease purchases, because the DPW dump truck that's on that list is a lease purchase, but we can talk about that when we get there.
Hey, Russ. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just have a quick clarification question or curiosity question for my own learning on debt service. My understanding is that most of our bonds run from 10 years to 20 years in term. And I'm curious given the changing interest rate environment, whether or not the town has opportunities to restructure our debt over those long periods of time, or because we have to go through the warrant article process to get those bonds passed to begin with, are we sort of bound to the, to the debt arrangements as they were originally stated,
Right.
or as they were originally agreed to? What do our interest rates look like generally? Are they adjustable rates that would change with the overall environment, or are they fixed in a way that they really can't be changed even if the prevailing rates change over time?
So I think the question you're asking is, can we refinance our debt if we want to?
Yeah, basically.
And the answer to that question is yes, we can do that. We can also prepay our bonds, in most cases if we want to, without a penalty. So, if that made sense to do, I mean, it's certainly something we could look at doing if we could get a low enough interest rate to refi. I don't know what the environment or the delta would look like, because I think 5-year notes were 2.22%.
Yeah.
10 years were a little bit higher than that. So, just like your mortgage, right? So if you're
Right.
refinancing, you've got to hit the sweet spot to make it worth your while, because there's always going to be expenses involved, legal and other things to refinance. But we do have the ability to do that.
And it doesn't require voter approval, even though the bonds needed to be approved by the voters to begin with?
I'm not aware that it would.
Okay.
I don't think you have to reappropriate. I think once the bonds are in place, I don't think you would have to do it.
Okay, yeah, I was just
Again,
curious.
You wouldn't have to revote it.
Okay, thank you.
So benefits and taxes, we did talk about, health insurance and the workers' comp being the significant adjustments there. And then, so that is really the budget, the entire thing, which I know I've been talking for a while, so. The entire general fund, I should say. So moving on to bond articles, we've got one, that's a TBD at this point, that's the recreation park renovation and expansion. That would be general fund, that's on page 3 of the CIP, so you can read about the project. I know Ty and Bond has been working on that with the Parks and Rec Department, so I would expect to hear more about that as the budget process unfolds. And that is really the sort of the big, I would say, the largest bond issue around for general fund at this point. And then under warrant articles, we have several, and they're all included in the CIP. First is the townwide vehicle and equipment replacements. You can see the numbers there and the different departments that have been requesting vehicle replacements. I think the one highlight I'd make there is that Parks and Recreation's request would be a fleet edition. That's a handicapped accessible van that they have requested for $60,000. And most of the other, I think all of the other replacement requests are repeat. So they aren't things that the committee hasn't seen in the past. And that includes the DPW dump truck. That's also in the CIP. The Parks Improvement Fund was passed by the voters this year, and the department's looking for another appropriation for that. That's on page 10 of the CIP. Sidewalk Program Capital Reserve Fund, which has been in place for a while, $120,000. Conservation Fund appropriation, I think this started as $50,000, then the Conservation Commission voted to increase it to $100 at one of their meetings. So that request is really coming from the commission.
That's what the planning board did that. The planning board.
Oh, I thought Concom recommended that number to the
Who was it, planning board?
planning board increase it?
Yeah.
Okay, my apologies. So planning board increased that to $100,000 during their CIP process. And then the next project we have is the West Side Drive reconstruction, design and engineering. We've been hearing from quite a few people in that neighborhood, of course, about the condition of their roads and drainage and so forth. And they would certainly like to see a solution. It is in our CIP. The DPW facility garage design, that's $100,000, that's on page 1 of the CIP. And again, that's an aging facility that we're looking at doing something with in the near term. So some funds have been requested by the DPW to get the design of that project going. And then the Pickpocket Dam letter of deficiency, $90,000, that's on page 15 of the CIP. That is, the town got a revised letter of deficiency in July of this year that actually has benchmarks and milestones on it with respect to Pickpocket Dam. So the DES is looking for us to accomplish the 2.5 times the 100-year flood analysis by July of 2020. So that's why this money is in the budget. Or I'm sorry, in the warrant article list. We have contracted with VHB to do the emergency action plan that was put in the FY19 warrant article listing and was passed by the voters. And that is being worked on that right now.
Well, I'll phrase it as a question. So this, you would agree this is an unfunded mandate that's non-negotiable?
I think that DES has the ability to come in and, under the dam regulations, if it's a high hazard dam, require us to do things. I mean, how much would be, they're saying to us the dam's deficient and we have to do something to deal with it.
It's instructive that it's a warrant article and not in the budget, to
Well,
me.
Could there be fines
So I would
involved?
say
There
that
possibly
the
could be.
subcommittee will
Does
drill
DES
down
like
on
to
that.
fine communities? They don't, but you're always sort of doing that.
The fact that we went from.
Doing the dance, I
The
call
fact that it
it.
went from a low hazard to a high hazard instantaneously,
Right.
it's kind of interesting.
Well, we've had similar things on stormwater over the years where
Yeah.
things just sort of pop up. And,
Yeah.
you know, Exeter's always sort of made progress forward, not necessarily by leaps and bounds, but it's always, forward, and we've always funded the needs. So I would anticipate the Public Works Committee the subcommittee will drill down into that number. a bit.
Yeah.
Well, how often is that dam checked? Anyways, did you guys say that?
Inspected, you mean?
Yeah, inspected.
At least a couple of times a year.
Oh, okay. I guess I would be surprised.
Yeah, we do have money in the budget for that. So 1.2 million roughly of warrant articles for the general fund.
Yeah, when you add it all up, it's a 1.223175. So just looking at that bottom line on the general fund, you can see the numbers we put together. The total FY20 preliminary number, which is budget plus warrant articles, compared to the FY19 general fund appropriations. And the delta in those appropriations is about 8.1% overall, when you add it all together. So that impacts 90 cents per thousand evaluation. And that impact description actually takes into account the following page too, which is on page 24. So just looking at our revenue stream for the general fund and looking at what we've come up with for actual revenue in December 31st of 2018 and projected, you can see the deltas there. And the big changes, I would say, are in projected revenue, if you look down for FY19, or as of 12/31/19, under sale of town property, you have 132,250, that's 18 Garrison Lane, that's a tax deed property. For projected revenue, I think with the pending sale of the property to the hospital, we could probably move that zero for FY20 to 50,000. We'll get the money this year, but we can project it either this year or next. So that, there's an additional 50,000 that's coming in. We've changed our account with Citizens, so we're actually generating more in interest income, which is good news. We've gone from a real low number to a much higher number, so that's good news there. The EMS transfer is the lion's share of the transfer in, so that's expected to remain pretty stable. The excess bond revenue account, as a revenue, that is essentially excess proceeds that are left over when a capital project is finished. And the 261,316 in the FY19 year is made up of Court Street proceeds, so the bridge project. We have some leftover funds there to be able to apply this year and next. So that's why you see the number in 2020. But the 2020 number also includes a decrease from the Great Dam proceeds that have now been fully utilized. So when we did the Great Dam project, for those who may not know, we borrowed the money, then we got a grant to offset about 50 to 60% of the cost.
Yeah.
And we've been applying those excess proceeds over the last few years, but in FY20, those will actually go away. So it means less revenue in that area. And then the use of the fund balance, which is always a revenue that we apply every year to lower the tax rate. So we use it as a revenue source. The 900,000 in 2019 includes land use change tax that came out of the Epping Road project, the senior 55 and older housing. So we do plan on, we have that available to use, and so we'll be having a conversation during the tax rate setting with the select board about how much of that to apply for FY19 and maybe how much to carry over to 2020 to sort of smooth out those revenues so that it's not such a, I would call it a bump, but to smooth it out. But the 90 cents is based on the projected revenue that you see there for 12/31/20. And I'd say right now that those are pretty good estimates. Building permits may end up jumping up a little bit. But motor vehicle, I think that's in line with what we've been seeing. And the other categories are pretty flat. I will say and give a shout out to, where's our representative? Right over there, who, thanks to the budgeted deal or the brokered deal at the budget, the state budget, I do think we may be seeing some increases in our return of general revenue sharing. So, which is great news.
Wait, who do we thank for that?
How much is that?
Additional school aid.
Julie.
So,
Thank you, Julie.
who said how much it is?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, Don's counting every penny
Well,
already.
of course I am, yeah,
Good
well, I
man.
want to know how much
Yeah.
the new budget was supposed to, the towns are supposed to get some additional funding from past years,
So we're waiting to find out on, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but we're waiting to find out, it's 323,000, but spread over 2 years. So essentially, 160 plus a year. And the timing of it is, I believe, is it this coming? Are they going to? Okay. Yeah, so this is the state's fiscal 20, they're on it right now. So assuming that everything gets approved, and it seems like it is, then we would be able to add 160,000 to 19, because we'd be getting it this fall,
Right.
and then another 160
Next
for
year.
20, if that materializes. So, and I think the sewer state aid grant money is
what?
hopefully there as well.
SAG grant?
So, yeah.
I'm sorry,
The SAG program funds that we fought so hard
Right.
for, along with many others this spring, have ended up in the budget. That's been passed.
I guess we had anticipated a potential of about $700,000 coming to the town of Exeter.
Right.
Which would be applied to the sewer, to the water or sewer,
To the sewer fund.
to the sewer fund, so it could help on the rates. So it's a potential 700,000 coming back. Beautiful.
Russ, what is our current bond rating, given these figures? Do you anticipate any change in that, one way or another?
Actually, that's a conversation I need to have with the finance office about being re-reviewed. Right now, it's A2.
It's
but
A.
A2.
A2.
Capital A2. But it would be nice to, I think, the town's in a position financially, I think, to be able to go back to the bond rating agencies and have them relook at our bond rating again, because we have been steadily improving our financial statements over the past several years. So our fund balance is in a good position to be able to do that. Our last audit, the draft financials have it at 5 million, which is a good number to have. And as I talk about fund balance, remember that whatever you apply in the year, it will bring that number down. So we have 5 million now. If we apply 700, it goes to 4.2, and then we appropriated from fund balance for the LED project, the sick leave trust, and the snow and ice deficit fund. So that will bring that number down, but still to have a baseline of about 4 to work from, and then see what replenishes, puts our financials in a pretty good position, I think, to be relooked at, and I'd like to see us increase that bond rating. That would be good. It's a good goal.
So another question, I know it's not on the town side, but it's on again, with the state budget, it's on the school side. The state was supposed to appropriate more money for school education in Exeter. Do we know what that approximately was, Julie, or you know?
$331 and, I don't know, $331,200.
Okay, so that would be coming to the SAU.
Yes.
So again, that's all helps to defray taxes, which people are paying the entire, tax bill is coming, which is school in town, but just thought it'd be.
It was based on free school lunches. That's how the money comes from.
And it's restoring stabilization to 100%.
Okay.
That's good news.
Say again about the stabilization, what was that?
So the stabilization grants that 2/3 of the districts in the state receive, they were decreasing at a 4% rate for the last 4 years, it was down to 16. The budget just restored them to 100%. So Exeter was one of the districts that received stabilization grants from a prior funding change, and so that's a large part of the money as well that's coming.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
Water and sewer? The good
Well.
stuff?
The juicy stuff?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Fully different. The question was earlier, it's about the TIF. You talked about the TIF revenue, Russ. And that the TIF revenue, the TIF assessed value is now 43 million.
Right, correct.
How much of that is because we did a whole new evaluation? So, in other words, for example, so a particular property in the TIF, let's say, before we did a new assessed, new reval, let's say it was 5 million, it now may be 7 million.
Right.
Does that get into our TIF balance? Do we accrue monies
Yes.
from that to go into the TIF fund?
Yes,
Okay, so even though it's just a basic overall increase in reevaluation, townwide reevaluation, that gets money into the TIF fund.
right. And that's because the TIF, when it was established, there was a baseline value of
Baseline.
78 million for the TIF. And ever since that time, there's been a couple of ups and downs there because we've had some values decrease too, but generally it captures whatever that increment is. And it's not all general valuation increase, but a lot of it is.
Some is, yeah.
But we do have new projects out there
Right,
that
well, no, I know that.
have been built since the first day of the TIF that are also increasing in value since then, so
So,
that's helped support that as well.
I know usually that's in the MS1. Do we know what our TIF fund balance is right now? How much is in that fund? From collected?
No,
tax
we've
revenue?
made, I don't know offhand, we've made one debt payment on the TIF bond. So that was done in 2019. We'll have another payment due February of 2020. That'll be the second of 10. So, and we'll know how much more money we're going to bring into the TIF. I was doing some rough calculations and just based on, because we don't know what the tax rate is either yet,
I
so.
know.
If the tax rate declines, the way you get money into the TIF is it's multiplied, the value by the rate.
Right.
So we'll have to hold off, but we're kind of hoping for 700,000-800,000 this time around as opposed to 500 and a little over 500,000 last year.
Was added to the fund.
Correct.
Okay. so
Right, but then we're using that to
To
pay
pay off,
debt.
to pay off the work that we're doing.
Right,
the water and
600,
sewer.
there's 600,000 that was paid in the first payment, 671,000, I think, the first payment on the TIF bond.
Yeah.
And so we actually needed 2 years of revenue to be able to pay for that, which we did. So I believe it's around 500,000, but we'll get the figure.
Again, yeah,
That's left.
and at some point in time, it'll be good to have those numbers. Again, the reasoning for this is, the sooner we pay off the TIF, the sooner that all that money is generated in tax revenue and then goes to the general fund. That's what,
Right.
So I have a question, since you're gonna talk about that. So with the TIF, with the revenues, does all of it go towards the bond? You just take all the revenue that you got that year towards that year's bond payment?
Yes, whatever's due, and then whatever we have left stays in the TIF fund itself.
Oh, you don't
Until we
plow that
make-
into the
until we
payments as
make
well?
Until we make the next payment, but to Nick's point earlier, if the TIF was so successful that we had $5 million sitting in it, we wouldn't wait to pay off the bond. If
Okay.
we could do it, we just do it. And we also haven't borrowed the full amount. When the TIF was authorized, it was authorized initially at $6.8 million. And now it's 7.9 because the traffic light project was added to it. So we've borrowed 4.7 of that, 7.9 at this point. So that 10-year bond that we're working down now is based on 4.7 million.
Okay.
But I know the TIF Advisory Board is meeting soon to talk about, are there other things that they're envisioning for properties in the TIF? You know, have things changed, what would they suggest doing differently, things that may have changed as a result of economics or projects that are coming along that they may feel they'd want to go and see if the board would support borrowing more money out of that fund. So.
And Russ, have we accomplished already the initial scope of work for the TIF with that only fractional share of the original monies that we got as a line of credit, or we got as a loan essentially?
So
you indicated that the.
We have enough in the TIF fund to pay the debt on the bond already, meaning
Right.
annually. So we're producing enough in tax revenue every year at this stage that we can make that debt payment for the 10 years.
Okay. What I'm asking is that, have we, having borrowed only 60% of the money that was originally going to be part of that loan, it sounds like the committee is now seeking out additional projects that could be used with those monies. Have we already achieved what our original intention was at the beginning?
So when we developed the TIF, we had a break-even valuation of what it would look like if we borrowed $6.8 million. This is all in the original TIF financing plan. You can look at it and see that. We amortized the $6.8 million over 20 years. So what we did is we actually borrowed 4.7 for 10 instead of 6.8 for 20. And from a valuation perspective, yes, we've already reached that break-even point on the 20-year. So if you went into the TIF financing plan from 2015 and looked at it, it had assumptions based upon what we need in value in the TIF to be able to break even over a 20-year period, and we've doubled that. We've exceeded that by 2 times. The break-even point was 23.5 million for a 20-year note, and we're at 42. So it's almost 2 to 1 at this point.
Were you asking about, sorry?
I think it was asked about projects, like what projects?
Well, yeah, you were asking if the physical part of the TIF.
Right.
Yeah. So I believe what's missing from that is the TIF road has not been built all the way to Mr. Carlisle's property.
Okay.
But it's been, and there were, in the original TIF, there was also, could have gone across 101, but I think that's pretty much not an option anymore, because there's really not a lot of land to develop out over there. But, so, from what I understand, that is the only part of the TIF original project that hasn't been built. I think that was your.
It was.
If that's the question, sorry.
But the utilities
I
are all
misunderstood.
done and
The utilities.
all the way?
Up to that, up to the Ray Farm, 116 units. The sewer is also all the way to what was the King property. So those were the two. And Mr. Carlisle's property, there's nothing planned for that currently. So there's not a road to that.
Right.
And the road pretty much stops with a turnaround right at that property.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So do you want to wait for me to present the water and sewer good numbers in November? We'll wait till November.
Might as well.
Yeah, give everybody a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't you can just,
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of technical stuff here, just
Right.
go over the sort of the highlights. We don't need to dwell.
The basic highlights in water are, as you look at the water table and you see the different programs that we have in water, in administration, the large-scale changes, the need to also do the impact fee analysis for water sewer along with the general fund. So system development charges and things like that, we need to look at that again to see if we need to make changes in that regard. So there is a reclassification of a position there that was approved as well. We now have an assistant water sewer manager instead of an engineering technician. So Steve Dalton is our assistant water sewer manager. And we also have an allocation for the part-time HR assistant. So That's the admin, those are the admin increases. And then the billing increases are audit fees, education and training. This is, the water sewer module is the last one we have to convert with the new Munis system. So there are some, there's some education and training that really needs to be done of the employees on that. Not just things that would come with the conversion, but beyond that, to get them comfortable with the system and using it. And also, since we have a new deputy tax collector, that's included here as well, to get some additional training there. The distribution, the big increase is metering, backflow, so the DPW really wants to keep up with replacing meters to keep them current, and that's 40,000 out of that 67,000. And then there's a fire alarm communication increase, that's the fire alarm system. The fire department is going away from the Keltron system, so they're requesting a different kind of fire alarm system to, throughout water and sewer, so that will be part of the conversation that we have with the department. And then in water treatment, you can see those are all the things that we've been talking about in terms of increasing lab equipment, lab testing, basically changing the way we're doing business in a lot of ways because of the new regulations that keep coming into play, the PFOA, PFAS. Even with the TTHM compliance, the total trihalomethanes, we're needing
That
to.
just rolls off your tongue. That's impressive.
Been talking about it for a long time.
I mean, we've unfortunately been saying it for about 5 years.
You get good at it.
Demosthenes.
We are having to test more and report more and do more. That's the simple explanation of these kinds of things that are coming through the budget now. And there is a chemicals increase, but that is really a filter media change at the surface water treatment plant. There are some decreases that have offset this line, but it's definitely increased. Lagoon cleaning is an expensive proposition that should actually save 45,000, not 45,
Something. Right.
So cleaning that lagoon is pricey but necessary, so that's the change there. In the debt service, we do have 2 projects coming onto the debt service budget, the Washington Street water line replacement, and then the SRF loan for the TTHM compliance project that we just did, so that's increasing that by 102,000. And then the capital outlay budget, every year, the Public Works Water Department puts together a list of projects to maintain and keep the system in as good a condition as they can keep it in, to provide the clean drinking water that we have, and those are the projects that are included in the FY20 ask. So that's the budget. And then in the water fund bond articles, there's the groundwater source development, which is an ongoing project that they're working on to try to expand our water supply, specifically in the area of groundwater, and that's described in the CIP. That project is proceeding. A couple of years ago, we authorized 600,000 to do an assessment. We have Underwood Engineers and Emery Garrett working on that work right now. And so as that work matures, you'll see these numbers probably begin to change a little bit. Right now, that's the number that they're using. There's multiple millions of dollars behind that number, but that is the initial number to do permit testing and things like that to get us to a next stage in that process. And then the Hampton Road Booster Station project is a project that is a reaction to the east side of Exeter experiencing some water pressure issues, and they're looking to install a booster station there, but I know the department's also looking at some alternatives to that, so I think that that's an ongoing conversation that needs to be had with the water department. So the 100,000 at least gets us to a stage where I think that decision becomes clear to maybe avoid the 2.5 million. If we can do that, we'd love to do it, obviously. So.
And with, in the utilities versus the general fund, a lot of the bond articles are for future work. It's more just, we'd like to sort of address it, like, for instance, the groundwater source development, because we approved the 600,000 several years ago.
Yeah, I think it was
2 years ago, at least. And we haven't done a lot on it until like the last 6 months, but we've sort of made the commitment going forward. So a lot of this doesn't necessarily get spent next year?
That's my question, of the 600,000 that we allocated 2 years ago, how much of it has been spent, and how much of it is the 81,000 projected, in addition to that 600,000? for
Well,
development?
I'll
That's
let
the
you know in
question
a
I have.
couple of months, when I talk to them.
Yes, okay.
But they haven't spent a lot
Sorry,
of the
directed at you.
the 600,000
Yeah.
has
I'd
just
like-
begun to be worked out.
And one of those issues with the department is, remember, they're planning on a 12-month cycle, so.
Right.
The department also understands, basically, there's one shot a year to go to a town meeting process and get a request in front of the voters for approval. So if they're starting a project in October, if they envision starting something in October, even though they may not be through the 600,000 yet,
Right.
they want to hedge their bets a little bit to be
Yeah.
safe and not be behind, end up being behind the 8 ball. So, but I agree, it's a conversation, and planning the schedule appropriately to the extent we can do it, we certainly try to do that.
One other question, maybe Bob can work his magic when we do that, is several years ago, we allocated a good sum amount of money, and I can't remember how much it was, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, to replace meters. I thought we
750.
replaced them all. You know, we're now talking another $40,000 for more meter
It
replacements.
did half. The 750,000 bond
We
was
only
for
did
half.
half.
Yeah, because there was a combination of the heads, and then some of them
Right.
needed the full meters. Some of the meters in town were 25 years
Oh,
old.
I understood the rationale, why
So
we allocated.
it was about half, I
I-
think is the number.
Really, I thought we were allocating it for all meter replacement. So it was only for half the meters in town.
Right.
Good, nice to know.
But the good news is now we have the reporting by our Public Works Department to individual homeowners who have leaks and things like that is bordered on the spectacular. I mean, they literally can tell people that they have a really bad leak within a few days and catch it. Now, whether people do something about it is another issue. But at least they're alerted to the fact that something is going wrong. So, and was sort of the return on investment that we were hoping for.
Well, it was still return on investment, that and the fact that some of our meters we thought were.
Were slowing down.
Were slowing down.
Right.
And then they're reporting the amount of water.
Exactly.
But I thought we had done mostly all the time, we only did half. Okay, thank you. You already answered my question, Bob, you don't have to do any more magic.
So the sewer fund, I would call, this is, FY '20 is really sort of stage 1, and FY '21 will be stage 2, where the wastewater facility debt service hits the debt service budget in full. In FY '20, there is an interest-only payment for the wastewater facility, but the budget for treatment and debt service is still a pretty significant increase. If you look at changes throughout the budget, the administration budget carries the other pieces of those other issues that we talked about with water, but here specifically, there's PFAS, PFOA work, along with the impact fee, assessment fee review, the NIPD's permit considerations and so forth. That is in administration, and then in billing, the same education training. It's basically a 50-50 split, so the same increases that you see in water are over here in sewer, showing 50% of the total increase. And then in the collection system, there is some increases in vehicle maintenance. Flow assessment fees are being paid now as part of this budget. Actually, the report I got was that the company that we were working with, Flow Assessment Services, wasn't billing us for years, and apparently just found that out.
Oh, jeez.
So bank error in your favor, collect $200, but they will begin billing us now. And so that's why that increases in the budget. And then there are fire alarm communications increases for the pump stations and over to the treatment budget. If you look at the changes there, the FY '20 budget changes include wages. That should say 5 full-time operators, not 6.
Yep.
And then, which is still an increase, but it's not 6, it's 5. Originally, when we had the old plant, we had 2 operators, and under this new system that we have 5. And then the benefit costs are adjusted to reflect 5 full-time operators. But the two most significant increases in the sewer treatment budget for FY '20 are the solids handling budget, which is a product of our new process, and then the electricity increase from the new facility. And that's 342,000 of the total. But it's definitely a change in the.
Yeah, basically, the
basic
good news is the
process.
solids aren't going out into the river, but the
Right.
bad news is we have to deal with them at a significant financial cost, so, before Mother Nature was dealing with them.
So,
And she wasn't billing us either.
She wasn't doing it very well, but she wasn't doing it
She
very well.
didn't, she didn't do a good job either. Well, actually, she
But it
did.
was free.
Yeah.
So in debt service, you have the 48.6% increase, and again, that's the facility interest-only payment. But you also have the Salem Street project coming on, the design of that, not the construction. And then in sewer capital outlay, the lion's share of that increase is the 441,000 for the lagoon sludge removal. So that's also in the CIP. Again, I've said this a few times, I think people know that at this point, there are lagoons out there that are still there, and when the project was value engineered, the lagoon decommissioning piece came off of the $55 million facility as a cost-saving measure. The alternative way to get at that is to go through a multi-year process of sludge removal at the lagoons, and so this is year one of several years forward. So in the CIP, the 6-year number is I think it's $2.8 million. So you'd expect to see about this amount of work done annually. And then they have made some vehicle requests, so has the water department, and I know Bob and his group will review those. Those are, when we do vehicles and equipment for water sewer, we fund them out directly out of the water sewer funds. So that's where they are requested. Sewer fund bond articles, the siphons project, that is in the CIP as well. You can see what it would do. The Webster Avenue pump station in the JD Hill area is nearing capacity. It's been there for a long time, and they're looking at ways to expand the capacity for that. If they can expand the siphons, they can expand the capacity or allow for improvements at the pump, at the lift station. And so this is also designed to provide future sewer user capacity, such as an extension along Holland Way, which in our current configuration is pretty problematic. But you can see here that it would, adding an additional siphon would also assist us when we have large-scale rain events and we're pushing a lot of wastewater under the river over to the new main pump station. So it's part of a group of projects. And then the Folsom, last but not least, the Folsom Pump Station Rehabilitation Project, which is our oldest pump station in the system over off Drinkwater Road, is in the CIP. And it's a 30-year-old pump station, and it's really outlived its useful life, so we're looking to replace just about everything there at that pump station and make it compliant with today's standards, and including the pumps and the electric and the security and the access to the pump station itself. So,
Okay.
where would you like to go from here?
Quick question about the
Make sure
lagoons.
Judy's
Is
in the
that
shower.
a required portion of the, what we're doing here?
Well, they're unlined lagoons, or at least one of them is.
Yeah.
So they're going to continue to leach into the river
Oh, so if you
slowly.
do nothing, then. that's
So
not
we have to get
enough.
rid of the stuff. It's been
Got it.
building up for almost 60 years.
Yeah,
So it's something, yeah, that we have to do. As Russ said, the original design included that, and then they said,
Yeah.
well, take that out and we'll kick the can down the road. That's effectively what we're doing.
yeah.
So we're gonna do it in phases, a little bit at a time, with the ultimate goal of redeveloping that whole lagoon area into a park or something. I don't know. Judy?
This committee makes recommendations to the select board, but given these extraordinary water sewer fund increases, I was wondering, does the select board have any guidance for us as we review the town budgets?
Well, I would like to, yeah, we can talk about that. I mean, maybe instead of, they probably haven't had a chance to Well, maybe they have, I don't know. I mean, is that something that you're willing to address now, or during that subcommittee? It might be worthwhile, it's a great suggestion, is have somehow, some way, your thoughts as part of the narrative. But we certainly can give you a little time to chew on it. If you haven't had a chance to
I
discuss.
don't want to speak for the whole board, that would be a discussion that we'd have to have at the board level, to, give kind of a consolidation. But I really feel like we need to see what you do.
Right. So I guess to answer Judy's question, you haven't discussed that internally, like, whoa, what are we gonna do? That hasn't been a specific point of discussion. So I think that's a good idea, Judy. We'll sort of maybe put together, a request or maybe some thoughts, but maybe during the subcommittee presentations for some of these, have that as part of the narrative. I'm the chair of that, so I can certainly take care of
Somebody
that.
needs to do that because
Yeah.
we have taxpayers, ratepayers, school fund payers, all coming out of our limited.
Many of them the
pockets.
same pocket, yeah.
The same pockets. And somebody needs to be considering the overall picture that's going to be presented to our taxpayers.
Well, excuse me, about 4 or 5 years ago, roughly around that time frame, the select board, when it passed the budget over to the budget committee, usually had a goal or gave the budget committee a goal or objective.
Yeah.
And it was really basically on the general fund, hold the line at X% increase. And back about 3 or 4 years ago, that changed, and the idea was to let the budget committee do what the budget committee does, because, again, the budget recommendation is gonna come back to the board. The board's gonna go through a very formal process, again, of wading through the budget, and they may make their own cuts, because they're the ones who make the final presentation to the voters for deliberative session. So either way, the select board gets an opportunity to weigh in on the budget. And the last 3 or 4 years, the idea was that, why don't we just hear what the budget committee has, review what they're talking about, understand what they're saying, use that as part of their input. And that's the way it's worked, so. And similarly for the CIP projects, which is usually the very big ticket items.
It's still probably worth having a discussion. I think we changed the format a few years ago, like Don said. I think it's been a positive change rather than trying to target something, because every year needs are different, and I think what we've done is worked. But given the extraordinary increases here, it probably would be worthwhile having a conversation. I'll get together with Kathy on that and we'll figure something out. We'll figure out an approach. But thank you for the input. And thank you, Russ, for going through this. Respectfully submitted doesn't even come close to to the work that you and your staff have done. It's excellent. I like all the cross-referencing and the, sort of the background and all of that. For the committee's purposes, not that I need to highlight things that are right up in front of the narrative, but what we're talking about on the general fund alone are increases that are generally double what we've ever done in the past. I mean, normally we're in around a 400,000 to 500,000 increase. We're looking at almost double that. So there's a lot of work to do here. That's not necessarily saying we have to reduce it, but we need to take a hard look and really seriously justify our recommendations to the select board, because we are talking about some extraordinary numbers. A lot of the sewer and water numbers, unfortunately, the unfunded mandate, comment earlier that, we voted on this 5 years ago. We knew it was coming. There's really no magic to it. You put in new equipment, the electricity is gonna go up, chemicals are gonna go up. We'll still try to toe the line. There are obviously some wish list projects there that may be subject to negotiation, so we'll have those conversations. But there's a lot of focus here that needs to happen over the next couple of months, because we are talking about more money than really the town has ever looked at on an increased basis at least as long as I've been doing this, which is 11 years now. So just some administrative things before we end up. Laura has gracefully and graciously taken on the task of coming up with the spreadsheets for the subcommittees. Because the budget, as you saw, as us articulated, some of the formats have changed, especially in police and fire. So to transfer over, last year and the year before's templates to the current budget wasn't as simple, and Laura knows the spreadsheet for the town backwards and forwards. So I'm gonna work with her on that. So we'll be having those spreadsheets come out to the subcommittee chairs, Judy, Nick, Christine, and Nancy, as well as myself. So you'll be getting those, and then there'll still be the narrative section up top to write up a little blurb about what you're looking to do. But again, as before, we're relying on the subcommittees to really make the pitch on behalf of the department. So drill down to whatever you need to do during your meetings, and then present to this board, a lucid argument as to why or why not certain things should be accepted. But we'll be looking to you folks to give us that versus the department. Nance?
Yes, my meetings start next Monday. Is it possible that I'll get that by then?
The plan is to finish them up by the end of the week.
Thank you.
I've got one Friday.
If you, but we don't need, but we have
Parks and Rec.
Well, the reality.
But we have 3 weeks before the actual
I
meeting to
understand.
discuss.
It's just
We'll get them to you as soon as we can, but we want to make them
Having
right.
the narrative,
Because
yeah,
we've
absolutely.
had to go through iterations before where there was some fine tuning, after and that doesn't
Yes.
go as well
It
either. So
doesn't. I understand.
even if, we'll make sure that you're taken care of. And just as a reminder, the subcommittee is also responsible for 2 things in the reports. One is making an assessment on the vehicle requests. There were a number of discussions here of a laundry list, both on water and sewer, but certainly on the general fund. So each specific subcommittee would, police and fire and public works would recommend on those individually in their reports, as well as the CIP. If you recall, a couple of years ago, there is a CIP night at the very end, but we're also looking for the subcommittees to give us a sort of an advanced feel for where they're coming down on the CIP, on the warrant articles.
During their presentation.
During their presentation, so that we can.
You're not holding back until the CIP. night.
We want to see how increases,
Yeah.
because there's the budget increase and then there's the warrant articles that sort of add a few percent
Yeah.
that nobody really sees until they get their tax bill the next year. So we want to have the monies all right up front as a way to present and analyze
Yeah.
what the true impacts of the budget are. As you can see, the raw numbers here, Russ had said, in addition to the 19 million, we're adding 1.2 million in warrant articles. Obviously, that would be on a bond basis, but still, we want to see what those gross numbers are. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, it's a question, and maybe you could get a sense of the rest of the committee. When the presentations are made by the subcommittee to the full committee here, could there be a little more substance behind the narratives in the report? So that when we get this beforehand, it's not just those spreadsheets. I was wondering if a little more could go into the narrative so that when we get in the preparation of the night or the day that the subcommittee has to give a report, there's a little background to the work they've done and their conclusions beyond just the spreadsheets.
We do the best we can.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the rest of the board feels, committee feels, I'm just.
Yeah, I understand. And again, that was sort of the collateral damage of not having the big presentations, but we also wanted to expedite the time part of it. We wanted to be able to talk about the money versus the narrative.
But it doesn't
part.
give the other committee members an awful lot of meat
Yeah.
behind the decision that the subcommittee is making, or the recommendation they're making.
So I guess duly noted to the chairs is to try to expand the narrative as much as is reasonable, but obviously rather focus on the numbers.
Can I clarify?
I think Corey had a comment first, and then we can go to you, Nance.
I was just gonna say that I think a lot of times we get locked into just regurgitating what's in the summaries, but what you were thinking about as you went through the process and why you arrived at a number, I think can be helpful stuff.
Yeah.
It's like your own story about how you got to where you got to.
No, that's it. Corey, what Corey just said, kind of.
Dan?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback momentarily on your comment about having some direction from the board. I think especially there's some really extraordinary numbers for a lot of different departments. And as we start looking at our own subcommittees, CIP, the plan for the next 5 years, I think as we look and, those sort of hidden numbers that we see when the warrants come through, having some idea of how we want to prioritize and where we want to focus. The first comments we got from the board in our very first meeting, and I wrote them down, we want to be fiscally conservative while being financially sustainable. And I thought that was a great way to put what we should be doing. And especially as my first year here, it's something that I'm going to keep in the back of my mind as we move forward. And in order to do that, though, I really think that, as we start looking at our subcommittees and we start looking at, the CIP in a lot of detail and starting to say, okay, well, we've got stuff that's 4 or 5 or 6 years down the road. There are still things like the water and the sewer budget that are going to maintain or continue to increase as well alongside of that. So I think having some overall direction would be really, really helpful, even in the near term. Even if it's just a ballpark, it's something that I don't think we should wait for a month to have those conversations. Again, I'm new here, so I don't know if those conversations happen quickly, but.
Well, again, as Don said, we used to do it that way. It would, the chair of this committee would get together with the chair of the board, and they'd come up with a number. And a number of us, and I will include myself in the us, thought that was a fairly capricious way of doing a budget, because there are a lot of maybe good programs, or maybe a department has been severely understaffed for years, and now they're adding 2 staff, or we have an II program that the state wants or the feds want us to do that's $40 million, and we say, well, we're going to put in $60 million or $60,000 every year now in the budget, or the paving budget goes from $500,000 to $900,000 in 1 year. So there's a lot of things that go into the budget that a percentage.
Well, I'm not
really doesn't.
necessarily arguing for percentage per se. I'm thinking more along the lines of a narrative, though. That's all.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think the input will be valuable. We'll try to figure something out. But I really think the budget needs to sort of stand on its own. We'll do what we can to get some input for the select board, but Kathy's right. They're looking for us as the Budget Recommendations Committee to make those recommendations. In fact, if we have any insights and epiphanies on how certain budgets should be massaged, I think they'd love to hear it. But we'll try to get a little back and forth going, and duly noted, I guess is where we put it.
Mr. Chair.
Anybody else? Corey?
Yeah, I wonder if a meeting between the chairs of the subcommittees, not to add a meeting to everyone's life, but a meeting within the committee of the chairs might be worthy of having, just to get ourselves all in this, in the same ballpark. Therefore, we're still the recommendations committee. It's from us, but it's at least the heads getting together and saying, given the size of it, given the uniqueness of this budget, I know it's not something we've done before, but maybe it's worth considering at least for you.
Excellent idea. We'll, let's talk after the meeting and set that up. I think that's a great idea. Is that something that you three would concur
Yeah, I
with?
think that would be helpful.
I'm sorry, you 4?
Given the extraordinary
You didn't forget.
nature of this budget.
I did.
12%
Good.
increase.
Let's meet after and we'll hash that out. That's a great idea.
I'm sorry, just a comment. The budget is the budget. It's what it takes to deliver services to the town people.
Sure.
But it's certainly we need to review it and understand it. But I think you're talking about really the big ticket items that you see, which is understanding the capital improvements program, how it works, what it's really all about. It's about trying to create a strategic plan of where we need to go, where we want to go over the next 5, 6, 7 years.
Right.
And that helps everybody, including the budget committee, say, okay, well, that $400,000 item is large, but it's part of a process or a plan to get us here in the next 6 or 7 years. I think having a better understanding of the whole capital improvements program, I think it would help And I don't know how we do that beyond, I mean, we've already given presentation to the planning board?
Yes.
Right, and the planning board should have given some recommendations as well.
You're right, yeah, and I don't, they have, I don't know if we've seen them yet, but.
I
And
guess
Don, we
may-
do have that
maybe-
understanding.
Maybe I've been
Everybody
talking
gets
with,
it.
I've been talking with too many people with fixed incomes, my neighbors, and they have a very limited budget. So when they see increases of 16.6%, 50.2%, 32.2 overall for water sewer, they're paying it out of their limited budget. So they want some help from us in how they're going to be able to continue to properly support town services.
Well, I think it's a great conversation.
Can't agree with you anymore.
And this
More
year,
than that.
this year is probably a good time to start that. So we'll, again, duly noted, we'll see if we can work something out to everyone's satisfaction. So one last administrative item, we have minutes from our July 24th meeting that were distributed at the beginning. And I know we've had a lot to go over, so I'm not sure anybody's had a chance to read them over carefully, but those of you who were here, and there were many of us, hopefully we'll see your way towards seconding, or, oh, you didn't get one?
No, I didn't.
When's our next meeting?
Thank you.
I will tell you
It's
that
okay.
after we do this done.
Connor already handed me his.
So if anyone's willing to make a motion to approve the things.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Any further discussion on the minutes of July 24th, 2019? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes as written signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It is a vote, and thank you for putting those together, very succinct. So our next meeting is the all-day meeting on Friday, October 18th. Begins at 8:30 here in the NOAC room. I would like it if everyone came a little bit early, at least 5 or 10 minutes, just so we can get settled in, because it is a long day. And Nancy will have, she'll need all of 8 hours to be going over everything. So, again, would appreciate everybody being on time. Lunch will be provided. I think Pam sends out an email, if I recall, asking what people want for lunch, so we'll deal with all those things. But so that's Friday, October 18th at 8:30 a.m. and it goes all day. If some of you have time constraints, we would love to see you for some of the time. If you cannot make it for all of the time, obviously that was sort of the cost of signing up for this, is that one-day meeting. But if you have obligations, but if you can be here for some of the time, we would all appreciate it. Judy?
Bob, our subcommittee reports are supposed to be delivered 48 hours in advance to Pam.
Correct.
And to our
To me.
chiefs or whoever else. But for posting our subcommittee meetings, is that a 24-hour requirement or?
I think it's 24.
24.
24.
24 hours, thank you.
And again, the minutes don't have to be voluminous. They can just sort of report the facts
Well, they won't be.
and get them to Pam. That would be great. Any other comments or questions about the process or anything? Again, feel free to email me individually. Been doing this for a while, so if anyone new has a question, Liz, you can yell across the street.
Sure can.
Bob,
My new neighbor.
I had two things if I
Sure.
could.
Go ahead.
One is that the departments put together narratives every year for the budget, so
Mm-hmm.
you'll be getting those, I think, by Friday is our deadline to
Great.
get those out to you, so you will have those.
Via email?
In addition to what you have here, so look for those. And then the other thing was, as I was looking at the warrant articles, the 1.2 million, there's always a question, how does that compare to FY '19? So this year, we had $488,000 in warrant articles by comparison that were approved at the ballot. So when you look at the number of 19,505,000, that includes the $19,117,000 budget plus another 488,000 in warrant articles. So as a relative number, I think it's always helpful to understand that's the amount that was just approved at the ballot.
How much was requested, do you remember? last year?
I don't know.
I think most everything got approved.
Everything
if
got
I-
approved.
If I recall.
Nothing got, everything got approved, the warrant article.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're on like a 70% roll over the last few
Last
years.
year that did not get approved ultimately, but I don't know what the numbers are off the top of my head. I'll have to go look.
Russ, on the narratives, how are we gonna get them?
So what we'll do is we will send out an email to the committee members, and we'll give you the option to either get them via PDF, one long PDF file, or if you prefer paper, we'll make copies and have you come in and pick them up.
Excellent. Corey?
Just one question. So on your analysis or your total general fund appropriations on page 23, where you take the 20 budget, add the warrants, and then compare it against 19, the total FY19 general fund appropriations would include the warrants that got approved.
Correct.
Correct.
That's correct.
And again, that's why we did that a few years ago, so people would see cause and effect.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty cool, let's get a new fire truck. Well, yeah, it costs $500,000 that you have to pay for, so.
Right.
and
So
you-
I
sometimes
will
it's
say
just-
the one caveat that I would put on that is that when we do those comparisons, we don't include anything that's funded from fund balance. So when you're looking at those numbers, they don't include the sick leave trust, they don't include the snow and ice deficit, and they don't include the LED, because that was actually appropriated from fund balance. Yeah, that was the Great Bridge deficit, that was a
But that's the
balance sheet
same, that's the
adjustment.
same every year. So we're
Right, so,
apples to
so what
apples
I'm
each
saying
year.
to you is that as you look through that, what I'm saying is that $500,000 was essentially applied to what we would expect to raise in taxation to pay for. It wasn't fund balance funded,
Okay,
so.
great.
And this year's funding sources haven't been identified, so that 1.223 million is, you can consider that comparable to the 488 in terms of
Right.
where the dollars would come from, if that makes sense.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy schedule. Thank you for the select board, the four of you who did come by, I appreciate it. We'll see everyone on the 18th, and we stand adjourned.